Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome anyone who is new. I am glad you are here. Okay, so this is not a, I'm not happy. This is going to be an angry video, okay? I have had enough. Like, I am so fed up with this nonsense. This I don't even like the word anti-Semitic. This Jew hatred that is going on in our country is out of control. Now, as a person who is far right, if you will, far right in my definition, I've explained before, but if you were new here, far right means everybody who is farther to the right of mainstream centric right wing. So on the right side of the political scale, you have centrist establishment or whatever. To the right of center, to the right of them is everybody on the far right. That it doesn't matter who you are labeled far right if you are farther right than that. And sometimes even if you are them, you are called far right. Okay, so in my definition of it, the entire rest of the scale that goes like this, of political right-leaning political ideologies is far right. Okay, so it doesn't matter. They call everybody far right, they call Tommy Robinson far right. They call Rupert Lowe far right. They call Carl Benjamin far right. They call everybody who is not mainstream establishment. Conservative encompasses also the entire political thing. Not all of it, but it overlaps on several other ones. They call you far right. So I am far right because I am farther to the right than the centrist right. So being far right, I know what you guys are all saying on the far right, because there's certain groups that that are adopting this Jew hatred thing and this Israel fixation. Not all of them, but it is everywhere on the far right. You cannot get away from it. Everywhere you go, they're all getting so obsessed with it, okay? And so I understand some of the stuff that you people are saying that are on the far right. I understand your criticisms, but it is baked in half truths and illogical, it's putting pieces together in an illogical way. And these things happen. I have noticed just in the amount of time that I've been alive that they're like these waves where this kind of stuff becomes popular and then people like grow out of it and it gets kind of dropped for a while. Okay. But this wave has gotten so out of control, so ridiculous. It is beyond the pale at this point, okay? And so I am going to be reviewing a video and debunking it on Joel Webbon's platform. And if you do not know who Joel Webbon is, we will go over that as well. But on Joel Webbon's platform, there is a video that I'm going to be going over and debunking because I cannot deal with this anymore. And I really hope that whoever is watching this, I know many of my subscribers will be, and I don't know what their political ideology is on the right. They all seem right-leaning, but I don't know where they fall along that line. But I really hope whoever watches this, if you are hearing any of this juice hatred stuff, that this will help open your eyes, at least in some way, that it is not the correct path to be going on, to be going over. I don't have this video mapped out. I am trying to put together a whole bunch of videos like in one day. So, this is the last one because it's so infuriating. I made this be the last one that I'm working on today. I'm a little tired, whatever, but I hope that I can do a good job with this video, okay? Because I do have an understanding for what you people are feeling and how you're expressing it, but it is not logical. It is not Christian. and it is not correct. Okay? It seems like it is, but it isn't. I promise you, as a lifelong conspiracy theorist that has seen and heard all this stuff before, there is nothing good down this path. Okay? So let's get into it, shall we? Okay, this channel, this is Joel Webbon's channel, and it is called NXR Studios. Okay, and let's see, is there an about me on this channel? Let me go to the about me. Unapologetically Christian, unapologetically right-wing, the new Christian right. So this is this new thing that they're calling themselves, certain groups on the right are combining, and they're calling themselves the new Christian right. It's this pastor, so this guy here in the, why is JP Sears on there? Okay, see, they're gaining more and more people. Okay, this is Joel Webbon here. Now, I'm just, this video isn't, I pay attention to what this guy does. I do not agree with him. I do not like him. There is something wrong with him. We are going to go over like some of his past, which is a little sketchy. Let me go back to this video. This video is, I read the most forbidden book on earth, and it predicted 2026 perfectly. And if you see here, this is Harrison Ford.
I never wanted to write a book.
Okay. And that's another reason why I'm making this video, because Harrison Ford, I've always liked him. I've always liked him. He was my favorite person on Alex Jones's Outfit when he was doing that morning show or whatever it was. And he was always so measured and well-spoken, and I really liked him. And he has changed so much. Even when you see the way he looks in this video, he's darkened. Like his aura around him is like darkened, and he just looks different. Okay. He's gone down this path of this ridiculous Jew hatred, and I don't this path of Jew hatred is getting people to lie blatantly. Okay, people who were never this bad. It was never this bad to begin with in the conspiracy world. Now they are just blatantly lying, like just straight out blatantly lying about stuff. And it is wild to me. Now, there is no way that I can believe that Harrison does not know what I am about to tell you, okay, about what this video. So this video is about the protocols of Zion, the protocol of the elders of Zion, okay? And it is unbelievable. It is unbelievable what this man does in this video, and he is lying, straight up lying about this book. Okay, now let's learn a little bit about Joel Webbon so you can understand the man who owns this platform. Okay, Joel Webbon is a Reformed Baptist pastor, founder and president of Right Response Ministries, and senior pastor of Covenant Bible Church in Austin, Georgetown, Texas area. He rose to prominence through online sermons, podcasts, theology applied, and conferences promoting a hardline Christian nationalist vision. Webbon identifies as a Christian nationalist. Now, I'm doing like all this gathering up a bunch of research and stuff. Well, really just not research, but putting lists together and things. Not every Christian nationalist is like Joel Webbon. So just because it says Christian nationalist does not mean that it is necessarily, there are like levels of that stuff. Some of them don't agree with the others and blah, blah, blah. and advocates for a theonomic post-millennial framework influenced by Christian Reconstructionist thinkers. Key elements include Christian nationalism. He argues America and nations generally should explicitly acknowledge Christ's lordship in law and culture. America is an Anglo Protestant project that belongs to Christians, not Hindus, Muslims, or Jews, in a full participatory sense. Non Christians can live there, but shouldn't hold power. He contributed to the Statement on Christian Nationalism and the Gospel. Patriarchy and gender roles. Strong complementarian patriarchal views. Women should cultivate a quiet and gentle spirit or risk being alone. He has questioned women's suffrage, repealing the 19th Amendment, and emphasized male headship in family, church, and society. He distinguishes this from soft complementarianism. Okay, theonomy and dominion. Old Testament civil laws should inform modern governance against abortion and homosexuality. Postmillennial eschatology. Christians should pursue cultural and political denomination so society increasingly reflects God's law before Christ's return. Okay, so that's part, I believe, of the Reformed part of his Baptist. They have some different beliefs than just regular Baptists, and I believe that that is one of them. Race and culture, controversial statements, including urging white parents to teach children Black strangers are far more dangerous, citing crime stats, calling slavery a blessing for Black Americans, and criticizing interracial marriage in some contexts or Black churches. He rejects woke anti-racism as a false god. Other positions: opposes democracy in its current form, reduced freedoms, including speech, strict immigration enforcement, and public execution for false rape accusations to deter Me Too, anti-globalism, pro-traditional family. His ministry statement of faith aligns with the 1689 London Baptist Confession, Reformed Credo Baptist, inerrant Bible with strong emphasis on male leadership and traditional sexuality. Okay, so his sketchy past. Webbon has faced repeated accusations and backlash. His own site has a responding to controversies page addressing some misrepresentations or derangement syndrome. Okay, so he had an early ministry in San Diego around 2012, accusations of a 10-month sexual relationship with a church member while an unmarried pastor at the Response Church, later San Diego Reformed, reports of elder concerns about pastoral disqualification, including arrogance, dishonesty, and failure to stay above reproach. He later moved to Texas. So people are saying that there was all this sketchy stuff going on in San Diego where he was more liberal, supposedly. So he moved to Texas to get away from this and kind of reimagined himself, okay, into this more hardline right wing type pastor. Financial leadership issues, claims of misappropriating funds from his former church, unverified in primary sources but circulated in critiques. Recent statements, viral clips on race, the talk for white parents, slavery as a blessing, women, voting, executions, anti-democracy rhetoric, and discouraging interracial marriage have drawn widespread condemnation as racist, misogynistic, or extremist, even from some conservatives. Well, from most conservatives. Like, crack, come on. Family control allegations, online rumors about controlling family dynamics or other personal issues often tied to his patriarchal teachings. Webbon frames such criticisms as leftist attacks or misrepresentations of biblical Christianity. Supporters see him as a bold truth-teller against cultural decay. Critics view him as promoting authoritarian theocracy, white identity elements, and disqualifying character flaws for ministry. Much sketchy past info comes from critics and ex-associates' primary documents, elder letters are referenced but should be cross-checked. His public output is extensive on Right Response Ministries site and YouTube X Joel Webbon for a full picture review, both of his defenses and primary clips. Okay, so that's this guy. Now, let me actually play you a video of him talking, because there's just like some of that stuff can sound really extreme, but then when you really boil it down and really try to like get to the fine points of it, you realize it's not as extreme. So as a person who studies the right wing, is part of the right wing and part of the farther right wing, I pay attention to this stuff really well. And oftentimes some of this stuff, the way it sounds, like me just reading that, sounds very, very hardcore. But then when you actually break it down and you really pull out the points and figure out what they're actually saying, it's often not as like extreme as that. But so I'm not trying to be like overly critical of Joel Webbon, but his views on like Black people, for example, and so some of his views, like some of that stuff are actual legitimate views that people can hold without being like super racist. Like people can say Black people could be dangerous in certain situations and you need to be like situationally aware. And then Black people can tell their kids that exact same thing. Like, hey, in some situations, when you're around the opposite race in certain situations in certain places, it can be dangerous. So it's okay to acknowledge that and talk to your children about that kind of stuff, like once they're older and they're able to understand that you're not saying like every Black person is dangerous or every white person is dangerous or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But the way that I don't know how to say this, but Joel Webbon's stuff is like really extreme. And I'm planning on doing a whole video on the right wing and different, like what everybody believes, and kind of break it down to where people can like understand it much better. But just for right now, this guy is like bad news. And the stuff that he believes is way too extreme, or like, I don't even know if he believes it, but the stuff he's like pushing. Okay, so this is called There Is Only One Global Religion, Holocaustianity. Okay, so yeah.
Let me tell you what the Holocaust was. And
would even say, yeah, I think Judaism is dumb. Most Jews today are secular. They're not actually, they're atheist or agnostic at best. They're not practicing Judaism. So Judaism is a religion, but it's not a dominant, all-encompassing global religion. And Christianity certainly isn't. Christianity is mocked relentlessly. Islam isn't, though it may try. It still has not been able to capture the entire world and make everyone submissive to Allah and, cast every country under Sharia law. I know that that's, catnip for boomers. If you want to get their attention, you talk about America. Iran has been, for 30 years, 2 weeks away from nuclear, and America is 2 weeks away from being underneath Sharia law. And this is, the biggest thing that we should focus on. And that plays really well with a crowd that's 65 and older and that watches Fox News. But we all know that that's simply not true. There are far too many Muslims in our country, and they should be deported. Absolutely. And I'm perfectly fine with American legislation that bans Sharia law. But that's not the real global, all-encompassing religion, a one-world order, a one-world religion that dominates every single country on the planet. No, there's only one real religion. It's not Israelism. There are plenty of people who are being critical of Israel, and yes, there are consequences for that. But you can actually criticize, to some degree, Bibi Netanyahu, the Israeli government, the IDF, Mossad, those kinds of things. You can criticize that to some level. Certainly in 2026, a lot more than you could in the past. And you can criticize Islam, you can criticize Iran, you can criticize America, you can mock Jesus Christ, you can post on Easter morning a post that doesn't acknowledge God at all, and then follow it up, just a week later with, a meme of the president, appearing as though he is divine, as though he's the son of God. You can do all that, but there's one religion that ultimately dominates the entire world, that you're not allowed to criticize, that you're not allowed to speak out against, that you must confess. We talk, we're so afraid of Islam, or we're so afraid of Christian nationalism. There's going to be forced conversions. If the Christian nationalists take over America, they're going to force everyone to confess with their mouth, that Jesus is Lord. You have been forced for 80 years now to confess a religion. Every single nation in the world has been forced, and nobody seems to be bothered by it. And the religion is Holocaustianity. It's not Israelism. It's not Judaism. It's Holocaustianity. I remember the great atonement, but the death of Jesus on the cross for the sins of the world 2,000 years ago. No, I remember 6 million Jews that died as martyrs, as a sacrifice, as a fragrance that ascended to the throne of God. And because of their sacrifice and these atrocities, this calamity, their deaths, God was deeply, deeply moved and willing to ultimately change the world, to make it more diverse and inclusive and kind and tolerant, right? Why can the West not have nice things? Well, because of Adolf Hitler. That's why. Why can we not have a country? Why, as Americans, why are we not allowed to have a country? Why are we not allowed to deport illegal immigrants who are raping our wives and daughters? Why can we not do that? Because Adolf Hitler bad. Because of Holocaustianity. That's why, because of the global religion. When these men, American soldiers, right? Again, these are not people in Israel. That'd be one thing if they were remembering their own history. But these are American soldiers, and they're not remembering their past American fathers who fought and died and sacrificed to liberate Jews.
Okay, I wanted you to hear what he sounded like and what he looked like and the aesthetics that he gives off. And because all that matters, trust me, when we are talking about right-wing influencers and right-wing podcasters that are far right, all of that stuff matters. Every single thing that they are showing, their effect, everything matters. Okay? And so he looks like a dark wizard form of Matt Walsh. And he tries to talk and have mannerisms of Matt Walsh. Okay. Then also, this stuff that he's saying here, this is part of what people on the right in America and in England are talking about a lot. But he says it in like a really weird way. Like an aggressive way, almost like it's priming your mind to be like super angry at like one group, like the Jews or whatever, because there is this thing that people have noticed on the right where, okay, a lot of this stems from the immigrant crisis problem. When you start bringing in a bunch of immigrants into countries that are different demographics, and you are basically like, the UK has like 5 years. England has 5 years. 5 years. A report just came out. The demographics that are left, there will be no more white people. They will be a minority. There will be a class of nothing but Muslim immigrants and one white child. Okay, basically, these new reports just came out. Okay, so people are really angry, and they are coming up with reasons why, and they look throughout historical stuff, and they see that the Jews in the countries that they're in pushed for a lot of these reforms that allowed this stuff to happen. Then, before people realized that much about it, just knew that there were these things that happened, so that were put in place, like the Hartford Act, like the Refugee Act, and like the bills over in the UK that allowed this stuff to happen. So, and it was like an increment thing over time. What they started noticing were these things. They're like, why did these things get put into place? What's going on? We don't want to have all these immigrants in our country. It's, replacing our demographics, et cetera, et cetera. And then the pushback they got in the media and stuff was from Jews. So Jews were like writing and calling them horrible names and saying they were all racist and saying that they were they're like, but we just want to have like, like, let's take England, for example. We want England to be for Englishmen. Then they would say, oh, you're being a national socialist. You're being blah, 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 and all this stuff. So then they try to start figuring out why Jews were confronting them so aggressively. Not only, but majority Jews were attacking them when they were standing up and pointing this stuff out. Then they started realizing that Jewish people in these countries were big pushers of these bills getting passed, of immigrants coming over, of blah blah blah. So then they started looking at their writings, and their writings said that if you don't have nations that are mixed, like multicultural, that's the terms that they came up with. If you don't have multicultural nations, we need to get rid of the nation state, because when we have nations that are strong and they're connected to each other through their culture and their language and their ethnicity, then we have problems that arise in World War II, and we end up having another Hitler arise. This is in history, so they've actually said this. So when the people on the right start looking all this stuff up and they put cherry-pieced pieces of puzzles together because they're hearing people put them together in ways that make an implication of certain things, then they're all now coming to this point where they think that all this was because of the Jews, and that the Jews are allowed to have their home country that's just for Jews, and nobody can be against that. But if you want your own country to be of your own ethnicity, the ethnicity that made the nation, because that is what a nation is. If you go look up what a nation state is, it explains to you that it is a group of people with the same heritage, the same language, the same culture, et cetera, et cetera. That is what a nation state was. First, they were city states. So you had like the Athenians, the Spartans, you know what I'm saying? Then they moved to nation states, right? The globalism wants to do away with the nation state, and they want everybody to be the same. That is what global homo means. It means all the globe being the same. We're going to mix all the races. Eventually, they're going to mix together, and it's just going to make a glob of humans that are not distinct from each other. And then, therefore, there will be no more wars, nothing. Everybody will get along, and everyone will be fine, because they have these notions about humans that are very liberal, like the blank slate theory that I've talked about on this show, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is not going to be primary what this show is about, but this is the stuff that people on far right wings are talking about, and it's all their conclusions are all coming down the road to where it's the Jews and it's Israel. So Israel is controlling our politicians somehow, that are making them put in these policies that are going against our country and them as a race. So it's like they have reasons why they've come to these conclusions, but they are not like complete. It's information that's being cherry picked in weird ways to come up with that conclusion. Okay. So that's sort of like, in my short answer, why all these people are so upset with the Jews all of a sudden on the right. And then you have people like this that are like super capitalizing on it. Okay. Now, I am not going to go into exactly why all that is like wrong. Okay. Right now it is half truth. So it's similarly true, but not the full picture. Okay. So, but I'll try to like just summarize it really quick. Jews tend to be more left wing. So, and they also have a culture of like a good culture of work ethic, 2-family households. So when you have a 2-family household, your family does really well. Well, they've done this and done this and done this for generations, and generation after generation. They have a good culture of raising families, large families, happy families, families that are productive, and they go on to make good of themselves in the countries that they live in, So then they rise up into positions, or they have wealth or whatever. And then because they are proactive people, they are a peculiar people. The Bible calls them a peculiar people. They are really go-getters, and when they are interested in something, they put a lot of their selves into something. So when they're interested in politics, they really put themselves into it, and their money and their whatever into it. Okay. So in general, they tend to be more left-wing. Just throughout history, that's just the way it is. I don't know why, but it is. Okay. So when you see these movements of, like, let's take the civil rights movement, for example. There was a lot of Jewish people in that movement pushing, supplying the funds, getting the laws passed, all that kind of stuff, because it's a left-wing cause. And that's just what they do. It's not some plot. It's not some, there were also not Jews that were leftists that pushed this stuff. It's not like every single one. Okay, so if you're just looking for one conclusion, like if you've come to the conclusion that you're blaming something on the Jews, then it is going to be very, very, very easy to find pieces to cherry pick throughout history that will lead you to have the evidence for that conclusion. Okay, we're not going to get into it all today, but just for this video, this was actually a perfect clip, because this is sort of, he kind of like encompassed in a short little thing why so many people in far right circles are upset with the Jews. Then there's other reasons where they just get way, way out of control. But like Nick Fuentes, for example, isn't the way out of control side. He's like this guy. Oh, not like this guy, but he's like what this guy explained, where they think that throughout history, Jews have had a lot of power. They get into power, then they change things for the benefit of themselves and for other minorities. And that is what is led to what we're in now, which is causing all the problems. Okay, so that's what they have as their worldview. Not going to get into why that's wrong now, but just that's helpful for this video. Okay. So now that you've seen this guy, add to stage. Okay, let's get into this video. As it's going, I'm going to stop and we'll talk about it, and I'm going to debunk a lot of the stuff that is in this video. I'm very disheartened that it is getting this far. I'm just like, there has to be like, I'm not for sure what we're going to do, but there has to be a logical thing that happens. We have to understand. That's why I'm going to make the video about the right, because people misunderstand them so much. A lot of them are not crazy, but then this stuff isn't going to help. You know what I mean? And this is actually going to make it a million times worse. I saw this the other day and I was like, oh my gosh. I'm not for sure what to do, but I will definitely be thinking about it and trying to, I have so much knowledge about the far right that there has to be something, some way that I can help with this situation in some very minuscule, tiny channel way or something. But let's get into it.
Called the Silent Jihad. I was called to be a parish priest, celebrate the sacraments, preach the gospel, marry couples, baptize children, comfort the dying, and to help build up the body of
This
Christ
is like
in
one
a
of their
quiet
ads.
corner of England. I'm still called to those things, but Christendom is under attack, and the body of Christ is bleeding. The Silent Jihad exposes how Islam's advance in Britain and the West is carried not only by terrorism, but by grooming gangs, Sharia council.
Okay, so this is just, they always play like a lot of weird ads. This is like probably like a documentary or something that they've made. This actually wanted to ask Grok what this InterX means, because I think it might stand for something interesting. Hold on, let me ask. Okay, the X is, okay, so new, N equals new, X represents Christian. The X is common shorthand for, or stand-in for Christ, drawn from the Greek letter CHI. Okay.
Demographic change, and the cowardice of leaders who refuse to name the threat. It is a priest's warning that unless we recover a bold, unapologetic Christian faith at our borders, in our laws, and in our pulpits, the nations once shaped by the cross will be quietly remade in the image of Islam.
Get your copy today. newchristianright.com/jihad.
We're now entering restricted broadcast territory.
They were planning to use the term fake news to drive a censorship program.
Some members of the media use their
They were always going to intend to crush independent media.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I say it's like a fractal image, right? The more you zoom in, the more you see, and it's like you can zoom in.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Off Limits News. I'm your host.
So Harrison is now joined up with them, and he has this new thing called, or Harrison Smith. I don't know why I was calling him Harrison Ford. Harrison Smith. He's got this new show with Joel Webbon's outfit called Off Limit News. Okay. And just look at how he looks now. I don't know if anybody's experienced with his old show where it was like, I don't know. Do you guys know what I'm saying? Like, he just looks darker.
Harrison Smith. We have a very, very special show for you today. I'm actually going to cover a document, a book that is still to this day considered forbidden literature. And it's perhaps one of the most dangerous tomes the world has ever produced. But we're going to get into it, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you do, please hit like and subscribe, since what we're about to do is not going to be algorithmic friendly, to say the least. Now, before we begin, and I have to admit, whenever I cover this topic, I get a little nervous, despite the fact that daily I sort of call out the most dangerous people in the world. What I'm going to do here today is going to go a step further than normal. And again, I hope you appreciate it. And if you do, please hit like and subscribe. Of course, you can find us at newchristianright.com. And by the way, we've announced a conference this November, newchristianright.com/conference. If you use the promo code Harrison, you get 20% off. It's November 12th through 14th in Dallas, Texas. It is the Christ is King, America After Trump conference, where we're going to talk about the future of American politics. And I hope to see you there. It's going to be a very fun time. I'm a little distracted because, again, I feel like what I'm about to do is very, I have to be very careful about this, and I want to make it clear what I'm trying to do here. This is for educational purposes, and this is a historical document that I think is of interest and should be of interest to people who are concerned about the way geopolitics are going today. The document, when I say the name, we may have to bleep the name. That's what I'm talking about here. That's the level that I'm talking about here. It's called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Now, if you've heard anything about this, you probably know it as the most anti-Semitic thing ever created, something that only crazy kooks and conspiracy theorists would even give the time of day. And to be fair, I also had that position for a very long time. I first read The Protocols of the Elders of Zion probably a decade ago, and I thought they were ridiculous. To be honest, I looked at them and I thought, this is obviously a hoax. It seems like a hoax because it seems so clearly to be written as an enemy of the people it's talking about, pretending to be them and writing in a way that nobody you would think would normally ever write. In other words, this document is full of phrases about how basically we're evil and we're going to do evil and we love doing evil things for evil reasons. And when you first read it, you go, okay, this has got to be a hoax. Who would write like this? Who would actually put this down? Even if it's what they believed, they wouldn't say it, would they? So I don't blame anybody for, at first blush, seeing the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion and rolling their eyes and thinking, oh, that old crap, who cares? But I've recently revisited the document. I've recently looked at it again, and over the last few years, things have changed. Things have changed in a couple different ways. We've seen the way that Israel as a nation has basically run roughshod over every conception of human rights. We also have things like the release of the Jeffrey Epstein emails in February of this year, in which multiple times in these emails, Jeffrey Epstein and his friends are talking to each other and referencing and acknowledging the fact that they see the world as Jews and non-Jews, or what they call goyim. And throughout the email tranche from Jeffrey Epstein, there are numerous references where Jeffrey Epstein says things like, we make money by speculation, leave the working to the goyim, that sort of thing. And he says this without any qualifiers, without testing the water to see if the person he was corresponding with would be amenable to this type of degrading language. If you don't know, goyim is a disparaging term that Jews use to refer to non-Jews, and it basically means beast. It means animal. It's basically the N-word for non-Jews, is a good way of thinking about it. And typically you think, even the most hardened racist out there.
Gee, is anybody saying that Jeffrey Epstein was an upstanding guy? How many white people do you think have chats where they call black people the N-word? If we were to if there was a nationwide scandal of something to do with some other white guy that wasn't Jewish, and it got released that he was calling certain races, certain different ethnicities of people vile names like the N-word or the other slurs for other races or whatever, and saying they're just our, whatever, working for us and blah 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 blah. Would that pertain to every white person? Would then people have the logical reason to start accusing every white person of being this certain vile way to other people?
In America, they don't.
And also, let's just fact check that. Let's just fact check that, because I've heard several different definitions. This is so infuriating. So just the other day, I was listening to Benjamin Boyce, and there was a Jewish man on there that he was having a conversation with to try to bridge the gap between these things. I've been seeing several people having conversations with Jewish rabbis and different Jews that will come on their podcast so that they can be like, hey, what do you guys think about when on the right, we kind of think this is going on. What do you think about that? Blah, 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 blah. So we can start having productive conversations. And in that discussion, he was asked about the word goy, and he said that the word goy doesn't mean what people on the right are saying that it means. He says that it means nations. So let's look at, I just looked that up so I could fact check this. So let me show you. I'm a little nervous and fired up. Okay, this is not a topic I like discussing, so I apologize if I seem scatterbrained. Okay, so goy or goyim is a Hebrew word that literally means nation or nations. In the Bible, it refers to any nation or people group, including the Jewish people themselves. Goy, Kadash, holy nation. In post-biblical rabbinic modern Yiddish English, usage among Jews is primarily means Gentile or non-Jew, someone who is not Jewish. It can be used as a pejorative, depending on the context and tone, can carry dismissive or derogatory connotation, implying outsider, the masses, or even cattle in some anti-Semitic misinterpretation exaggerations. This is debated even within Jewish communities. Okay, so there we go. So that's where that comes from. But just in general, it literally means nation. Okay?
Don't tend to drop an N-word with a hard R in company if they don't know that the people around them are going to think similarly than them, right? It's not the type of thing you say in polite society. You only reserve that type of thing if you're in a conversation with somebody that thinks the same as you do. So when you read Jeffrey Epstein's emails and he's very casually dropping these terms, it makes it clear that, all right, there's a class of people, there's a community of people that think this way and that talk this way and that are open about it amongst themselves, even if they conceal it from the rest of us. So things like...
Was he just admitting that he talks that way about other races when he's in company that he knows will be accepting of that? Is that what he just said? Then how is it any different? It's like holding two separate standards. Does that make sense?
That have occurred that have caused me to take a second look at this document. That being said, I have no reason to believe that this document is actually the minutes of a meeting of a bunch of elite Jews in the late 1800s. This could very well be some sort of historical fabrication, a fraud of some sort. I don't know. What I do know is it's been around since the late 1800s. I know somebody wrote it, and I know that the ideas expressed in here, as revolting and sort of horrifying as they are, they reflect a certain mindset amongst a lot of people around the world and the way that they conceive of human relations. And so I think it's worth it to go through this, to look at it, to study it, in the same way that one would study Machiavelli's The Prince, because The Prince has a lot of sort of similar concepts to this. If you're not familiar with that book, Machiavelli's The Prince, it has a very similar view to the Learned Elders of Zion, but it has almost an inverted starting point. So you'll see in the protocols, they basically have this belief that humankind and every human being is in their heart evil and tyrannical and vicious and petty, and that basically they need to be controlled like herd animals, like beasts, to be corralled and controlled. Machiavelli had a different perspective. He basically thought everybody was good at their heart, didn't want to hurt everybody, but that you needed to teach rulers to be sort of ruthless and heartless in order to maintain sovereignty and peace in the realm. So they both sort of come to the same conclusion that tyranny is necessary, only Machiavelli's The Prince sort of comes at it with this idea that you're going to have to train the leaders of the world to be bad, whereas the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion basically says humans are bad and you need strict and tyrannical rulers to keep them in order. Regardless, that's how I conceive of this.
Okay, so I'm going to let this play for a little bit, but please do remember that he brought up Machiavelli and The Prince, okay, which I have also read. I've read a lot of stuff from the past that would be like philosophical books, and so I am very well versed on stuff like that. Just remember that he brought up that it was very similar in his view to the way that The Prince is written and the way that The Prince lays out some fundamental ideals and stuff like that that the ruler needs to implement in order to maintain.
Document like Machiavelli's The Prince, it is a tome of political ideology, and it's worth it to look into this because it seems to so uncannily predict situations that we find ourselves in now. That this wasn't the situation 5 years ago, wasn't the situation 2 or 3 years ago in many cases. In other words, the changes that have gone on in the last 2 years, really since the October 7th attack and the war on Gaza and sort of the mask off moment for Israel across the world, things have changed significantly. And so I think it's worth it to revisit this document. There's also some other very funny connections with the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. If you look up the official debunking, right, like the official, the investigation into this document to determine whether it was real or a hoax, and the official account says this was a hoax.
So while I was listening to this, I was like, oh, okay, cool. He's going to mention the actual debunkings that have gone on throughout all of history by historical people that are actually extremely sound. I thought, okay, at least he's going to mention that to his audience. No, he doesn't.
This is not a real document. This is a fabrication of some sort. The person who made that determination was the founder of the CIA, Alan Dulles. So I don't know if that's the most trustworthy source for determining the legitimacy or veracity of a document or not. I guess I'll leave that.
Spoiler alert. No, it was not. Okay? No, it was not. Alan Dulles of the CIA. No.
That up to you. An interesting connection with the Dulles family, John Foster Dulles and Alan Dulles, two brothers that sort of founded the CIA and the spy state as we know it here in America. I believe it was John Foster Dulles, Alan Dulles' brother, who was there at the negotiations for the Treaty of Versailles following World War I, and it was John Foster Dulles himself who insisted.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up my sticky notes and make a note because who even knows if that is true? But I don't want to get into that now.
On having the war guilt clause included in the Treaty of Versailles. That was the poison pill that basically guaranteed that Germany would never be able to rebuild.
Conspiracy world has gotten so horribly bad that I literally cannot trust any sentence that they say ever. Like, it's unbelievable.
And would, suffer economic catastrophe and basically ensured that World War II would have happened somewhere down the line. So some interesting connections for the old Alan and John Foster Dulles brothers, who of course are now honored in America with a airport named after them and all sorts of other stuff. We could go on and on about the Dulles brothers, but I thought that was an interesting sort of caveat here that, okay, it's officially declared a hoax, but the person who declared it is one of the greatest deceivers of all time. So, I don't know how much we can rely on that. I'm just wondering, is there anything else I need to prepare you for before we actually get into the document? But no, I'm literally doing this because of educational purposes. I think this is a valuable political document to look at, especially in the modern world. And one of the reasons I'm nervous to do this is because people that talk about this document tend to be labeled with not exactly the most complimentary labels. You don't want to be somebody that is known for wandering around carrying a hard printed copy of the protocols like I've been. But like I said, when I first read this, I also thought it was ridiculous. I also thought it was, way overdone. I compare it to my experience first reading 1984. If you read 1984 as I did in high school, it can seem ridiculous. You sit there and you go, okay, it's making some points, but there's a scene in 1984 where people go to a protest with a sign. Then the situation changes during the protest, and the people are destroying their own signs, saying this must have been planted on me by East Asian agents or whatever. And I remember reading that scene and just thinking, this is stupid. Nobody would ever actually be this crazy, right? And then I look around the world today and I go, maybe Orwell was onto something. Maybe he was more right than I gave him credit for. I feel similarly about the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, where you first read it, you think this is ridiculous, who would believe this? And then you become a little bit more wise to the world and you come back and say, maybe this is a valuable thing to study. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to study it. We're going to look at it.
Okay, so this video, YouTube, is also for educational purposes because I am going to educate people on what this book actually is. Because let me tell you a story about my life. I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I have been for a really long time. And this Jewish nonsense is nothing new. It's been around for a really long time. So when I was younger, like very much younger, like probably 19 or something, I fell into the rabbit hole of like learning about this stuff. And it was like the back in the day type information, but it's all the same still. It shows you there's documentaries where it shows you like every person in the world that is in charge of anything is a Jew. And it's like shows you reels and reels and reels of Jewish people that are, in the levers of power, that are the Rothschilds, and they own this and this and this, and every person at the top of every corporation is for some reason Jewish, and on and on and on, cherry-picked information that tells you all this stuff. And when I fell into this nonsense, I thought, okay, well, that's really weird. Like, it does kind of seem like Jews are in control of the world. I didn't like go off the deep end and start hating Jews or anything. Like, I was just kind of like, I took the information in and I was like, oh, okay, maybe that explains some of the weird stuff that's going on, right? Well, then, and you hear about the protocols of the Elders of Zion. And you're like, and it's like, oh, and they wrote this book and it tells their whole plans all mapped out or whatever. And so guess what I did? Eventually, I went and looked at the book. And I thought that that was like ridiculous and also sounded very familiar to me. And I thought it was weird that it would sound so familiar to me. So back in the day, without any AI, without any really good help and information out there, I had to learn why that book sounded so familiar and weird. Wonder why. Why would that book sound so familiar and weird? Nowadays, though, it's so easy to show you guys because all I have to do is put it into Grok, just like Harrison could have done. Just like Harrison could have done. Gee, I wonder if when I put it into Grok, if it said that Alan Dulles debunked the whole thing. And he's the source of the debunking. Gee, I wonder if it said that. Let's see what it said, shall we? Okay, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a notorious anti Semitic hoax and literary forgery that falsely claims to be the minutes of a secret meeting by Jewish leaders plotting global domination. It is entirely fabricated, plagiarized from earlier non Jewish sources, and has been thoroughly debunked for over a century. It was created around the turn of the 20th century by Russian secret police to incite hatred against Jews. And I'm not going to get into this episode why there was this stuff going on in Russia during that time with Jewish people and all that, but we will probably get into it at some point on this channel. Okay, origins and fabrication. First publication. It appeared in abbreviated form in 1903 in the Russian newspaper Zamni, which means the banner, published by Pavel Krushkovan, an anti-Semitic agitator. A fuller version came in 1905 as an appendix to a book by Sergei Nilus, a Russian mystic and Tsarist official. Nilus provided varying, contradictory stories about its discovery. Example, stolen from a Zionist headquarters was one. Creators, likely fabricated in Paris by O'Connora, those are the secret police agents, possibly under Pietro Krakowski or involving Matvey Golvanitsky. As much as I am up to date on Russian history and such, I am not good with their pronunciations unless I'm hearing it all the time. It was produced in the context of Russian anti-Semitism, pogroms, and efforts to discredit liberal and revolutionary movements by blaming them on the Jews. Now, let's pause that there for a second. Okay, so there has been a historic incident, like what would you call it, phenomenon of whenever things are going really bad in a country and things are getting like out of control, the people in charge will look for some other reason besides them to blame the problems on, to distract the masses of the population against being upset with them, to put it on being upset with somebody else. And unfortunately, for a lot of the reasons I mentioned earlier, where Jews just have a culture about them that permits them to then be able to rise through ranks in society into well-positioned positions, in society. They have really good jobs. They are doctors, they are lawyers, they are politicians, or the people behind politicians, or bankers, or whatever. They tend, because of their cultural upbringing, like I explained, they tend to become well-to-do in the countries and the societies they live in. And just like everybody else, they have people in their people group that do bad things. So it's easy to point historically, if you cherry pick, if you pick certain instances to point to where you manipulate data and you manipulate information in a way where you don't give the full picture and you don't give the full context, it is really easy to pinpoint the maladies of society on to them. And that is what has happened throughout time. That is something I have learned just by growing as a person, learning history, becoming more read, becoming more logical, learning about logic, learning how to be analytical and break down information. I have learned and come to this conclusion over time. Lots of people, like I explained, this sort of like thing will come in waves in like conspiracy circles. A lot of people will fall into this and they will typically, like I did, not just become rabid Jew haters, but be like, oh, maybe something weird's going on. And then you kind of like, as you grow, as you learn, as you figure out more things, you sort of leave that behind. Like I did very quickly. Like I was like, oh, okay, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? but this last wave is like kind of really pushing it too far. Too many people are getting involved, I think, from the masses. I think it's because of certain situations. The war in the Middle East, but that Israel's going on, like having right now, the Epstein files, et cetera, et cetera. There's just too many things. And then Charlie Kirk, there's just too many things being thrown into the masses with too many newbies coming in, like masses of them all at once. And it's leading to this perpetuation where there hasn't been enough time for these people to absorb the information, kind of then be like everybody kind of is, where they're just not thinking about it thoroughly all the way through. And it's just becoming so widespread before people have a time to, develop the thoughts properly within themselves and then move on. Right. And so it's just not good. This forebodes very bad things. Okay. But historically, that's what people do. They will blame Jews. They're like a scapegoat in societies. It's just the way that it is, okay? And so that's what was going on here, and that's why here in this. So it was in efforts to discredit liberal and revolutionary movements by blaming them on Jews. So you could get people upset with these liberal and revolutionary movements by blaming it on this group, like, oh, they're causing all this problem, because in societies back then, when all this like ideology started popping up over and over again, the masses of people, another thing that was going on, kind of like similar to today, is that you had the Industrial Revolution, which was causing, you took peasants who were agrarian and worked on farms and threw them into these horrible working conditions, and life was really, really bad back then. That's why people were so more likely to want to be involved in revolutionary thinking and these various liberal ideological ideas, right? Because it was just a bad time for people, and they wanted better lives and stuff. So the people in charge, like the monarchs and stuff, they were having a hard time dealing with these uprisings and the masses being so dissatisfied with their lives and their living conditions and their working conditions and etc. So, okay. Timeline evidence. The text references events like the 1990 assassinations of King Umberto I of Italy, so it could not predate 1901 or 1902. Claims linking it to the 1897 First Zionist Congress in Basel are false. Okay, so that's an important thing to note here. It was never a genuine Jewish document. Russian investigations at the time and later probes confirmed it as a police forgery. Tar Nichols II reportedly dismissed it once informed of its falsity. So even back then, you guys, so even back then, oh my gosh. So even back then, it was like, okay, what is this document? Oh my gosh, what's happening, right? Then they like investigate it, and they even came to the realization that this wasn't true. Okay, plagiarism and literary sources. So one way that people will, there's people who do this, like Wes Huff is one of them, who that's their job. They study documents and they look for discrepancies in the text that would let you know that it is a forgery, right? So Wes Huff does this type of stuff. There's people like, this is a literal job. Okay? So that has been done to this document on numerous occasions throughout history. Okay, so the text is a crude patchwork. Primary source Maurice Joly's 1864 French political satire, Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. Okay, so in Montesquieu, a critic of Napoleon II's authoritarianism with no mention of Jews. Large sections, hundreds of parallel passages are lifted almost verbatim, with Jews or elders substituted for the original speakers. Okay? Now, this part here, where it's a political satire dialogue in hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. Okay, so these are two people from history that the writer of the satire probably read their works. So, okay, so here we go. So the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is indirectly but heavily related to Machiavelli's The Prince through its primary source, Maurice Joly's 1864 political satire, Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. Okay, so Machiavelli the Prince, this is the foundational text. It famously advises rulers on pragmatic, often ruthless power politics, maintaining control through deception, manipulation of public opinion, strategic cruelty when necessary, appearance of virtue, and prioritizing stability over morality. The ends justify the means, and practice Machiavelli portrays the ideal prince as a cunning fox and strong lion. Joly's Dialogue in Hell, 1864. Joly wrote this as thinly veiled attack on Napoleon III's authoritarian regime in it. Machiavelli appears as a character in hell, defending and updating the despotic tactics from the prince for 19th century use. He debates Montesquieu, who represents liberal constitutional government. Machiavelli explains how to manipulate the press, create economic crisis, control public opinion, undermine morality, incite revolutions, and establish a hidden dictatorship while pretending to support liberty. Joly makes Machiavelli the mouthpiece for Napoleon's real policies. The book contains no Jews or anti-Semitism. It's pure French political satire. Russian secret police plagiarized large sections of Joly's dialogue, hundreds of passages with protocols 1 through 19, closely following the order of Joly's early dialogues. They simply replaced Machiavelli Napoleon with the fictional elders of Zion, substituted generic masses or French citizens with goyim, framed the ruthless strategies as a secret Jewish plot for world domination. The forger kept the Machiavellian tactics almost intact, but gave them an anti-Semitic twist. Okay, so when Harrison says it reminds him of the prince, well, there is a reason why it reminds you of the prince. Harrison? Secondary source that it plagiarized from was a chapter from Hermann Goetze's 1868 anti-Semitic German novel, Bayreuth, featuring fictional Jewish leaders plotting in a Prague cemetery. So, sorry I cannot pronounce anything. I never said I was the greatest speaker in the world. In 1921, the London Times exposed this plagiarism side by side, calling it a clumsy forgery. In 1935, Swiss court case formally ruled it fake. Historians like Philip Graves, Vladimir Burtsov, and others confirmed the details. The document consists of 24, sometimes 27 protocols outlining alleged plans to control the press, economy, education, and governments, promote liberalism, socialism, and wars, and undermine Christianity and morality. All classic anti-Semitic tropes recycled from earlier libels. The text is poorly written, internally inconsistent, and anachronistic, hallmarks of a rushed forgery. We will come back to that in a minute. But I just want you to think about what he literally just said in all the bit that we just listened to about how, oh, like it sounds like Machiavelli. It sounds like, why would the Jews write something where they're literally saying, like, I need to be evil, we need to do this, we need to do that, blah, 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 blah. And it's literally been proven. It literally takes 5 seconds to put that into Grok to get all that information. And they have side by sides from the book books that they plagiarized that we will look at in a little bit. But this, there is no way that Harrison couldn't know this, okay? There's just no way. And now where is he getting Alan Dulles from? I don't know. Let's ask Grok. There's just no way that he could not know all this information. And it is so unbelievably and incredibly dangerous in my mind to put this out here as if this is a real thing, because it fits your worldview that you have right now. You have a worldview that you have pieced together with information that you've gathered throughout history that you've cherry picked and put out of context where you don't have the full picture. And you've created a worldview where this fits the worldview. So you don't care that there are legitimate reasons that discredit this document, that it should not be accepted as any way truth. It should not be taken as educational purposes to examine the world today so that you can place all your world beliefs on the backs of the Jewish people. Because this type of stuff creates horrific things throughout history. This book, the Nazis picked it up out of Russia, which we'll get into later. We'll explore that too. It was used to incite violence. And it's not true.
And we're going to identify what of these protocols are still active and being pursued. Now, it is very hard to find this document. You cannot find an accurate translation almost anywhere. I believe I have the most accurate translation I can find. It's not in sort of vernacular English. It's more in the English that it was written in, or, well, it would have been written in, I don't know, Yiddish or Russian or something, but the original translation, it has sort of archaic verbiage that I think is interesting. But this is, I think, the most accurate.
Okay, they were written in Russian. Obviously, they were written in Russian. Okay, so while the forgery was created in Russian, large portions were plagiarized from Maurice Joly's 1864 French book, Dialogue in Hell Between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. The Russian forger translated and adapted Joly's French text, substituting Jewish conspiracy elements. So the source material was French, but the protocols as a distinct document exist first and foremost in Russia. It was later translated into English and then into German in 1920 and many other languages, becoming an international anti-Semitic staple. Okay, so the reason why it probably sounds so strange is because it was a very poorly done and poorly written and hastily written, plagiarized from a French satire, political satire, into Russian.
Translation. And let me give you a quick history of it. So it's called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And again, it has long been one of the most demonized documents in the entire world, okay? And so we'll go down to the introduction. It says, this book in which these protocols are embodied was first published in the year 1897 by Philip Stepanov for private circulation amongst his intimate friends. And of course, most people know about this in relation to Henry Ford. Mr. Henry Ford, in an interview published in the New York World, February 17th, 1921, put the case for nihilist tersely and convincingly thus: the only statement I care to make about the protocols is that they fit with what's going on. They are 16 years old and have fitted the world situation up till this time, and they fit it now. That's, of course, a very famous quote about the protocols.
My God, this is going to have to be a series because it's so complicated. It's so complicated. Okay, let's go over this really quick. Henry Ford was one of the most prominent promoters of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in the United States. He used his wealth, influence, and newspaper to spread the anti-Semitic forgery widely in the early 1920s. Starting in 1920, Ford's newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, which he owned, ran a long series of anti-Semitic articles titled The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. These were compiled into 4 booklets that were distributed through Ford's dealership and reached hundreds of thousands of readers. Circulation peaked around 700,000 to 900,000. The series heavily quoted and treated the protocols as actual factual evidence of a Jewish conspiracy to control finance, media, government, and world events. Ford's most famous direct statement in 1920, the only statement I care to make about the protocols is that they fit in with exactly what is going on. They are 16 years old and they have fitted the world situation up to this time. They fit it now. He and his editors presented the document not as a forgery, but as a credible explanation for wars and economic problems and social changes. Apology. In 1927, after years of controversy, a liberal lawsuit by Jewish lawyer Aaron Shapiro and mounting public pressure, including boycotts, Ford issued a public retraction and apology in 1927. It was largely drafted by Jewish leader Louis Marshall. I confess that I am deeply mortified that this journal has been made the medium for resurrecting exploded fictions, for giving currency to the so-called protocols of the wise men of Zion, which have been demonstrated, as I learned, to be gross forgeries. Had I appreciated even the general nature of these utterances, I would have forbidden their circulation without a moment's hesitation. I deem it to be my duty to make amends for the wrong done to the Jews by asking their forgiveness for the harm that I have unintentionally committed. He also claimed ignorance of the content, a claim widely doubted by historians, closed the Dearborn Independent, and ordered remaining copies of the International Jew destroyed. Context and legacy. Ford's promotion of the protocols gave the protocols significant mainstream credibility in America and helped spread them globally, including to Germany, where they influenced Nazi propaganda. He never fully renounced his private views, according to many accounts, though he publicly distanced himself in 1927. This history is well documented in sources like the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, PBS American Experience, and scholarly works on Ford. Okay, now, why would Henry Ford do such a thing? Now, this is what I mean by the world is extremely complicated, and this is what I mean by these ideas that the conspiracy that Jews are in control of a global conspiracy to destroy the world is nothing new. It has been around for quite a long time. So Henry Ford promoted the protocols of the Elders of Zion because he genuinely believed or was convinced that it explained the world's problems through a Jewish conspiracy. Ford's actions stemmed from a mix of personal prejudices, cultural influences, and specific events, deep-seated personal anti-Semitism. Ford held long-standing negative views of Jews, seeing them as responsible for many societal ills. Now, this part here, seeing them as responsible for many societal ills, this part here. So this is one of the things in the conspiracy theory is that they have a plot to promote degeneracy and cause issues to weaken and destabilize the nations that they live in so that they can therefore rise to the top and control the nation for the benefit of themselves. So, for example, they will say in the conspiracy that Jewish people promote that they own all the companies and that they're pushing on the population, which makes the men all messed up and weak and blah, blah, blah. And then that is one way that they are able to control populations, and with usury and with whatever. That all these things they blame on the Jews because Jews tend to be in these industries. Okay. They're not the only ones in the industries. Okay. But let's just go with this theory for a second. Okay. Let's go with this theory. Sure. They are responsible for all the ills in society because they have this, pinky in the brain plot to control the world. Jews do not force men to watch. Jews do not force you to watch that stuff. You choose to do that. It is your own choice. Jews do not force you to take out loans or live beyond your means by using credit cards. Okay, you choose to do that. And on, think of all the things. So when you say that Jews are able to just magically spread the stuff around and get you to do this stuff, what you are saying is that Anglo-Saxons and Germanic tribes are so weak, such little fortitude, that all it takes is a small group of this tribe from the Levant to come into your country and it's just completely ruined. You have no agency. You have no power to withstand it. You are literally saying that your ethnicity, your nation, your tribes are weak. And that is a complete distortion of history. Anglo-Saxons and Germanic tribes took over vast portions of the world. They colonized places. They went across seas and developed new lands, new countries, new nations. They have done great things all throughout history. The Celts fought off the Romans. The Scottish fought off the English. The Franks took over the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? So this idea that if you buy in to this conspiracy, then you're buying into the fact that you are weak and you are so easy to destroy that all that you have to do is send in, a small population of a Levant tribe and everything goes to crap. If you literally and logically think about this, then you will understand that that is a discredit to your own nation and your own tribe. Okay, a friend recalled him attributing all evil to Jews during a 1919 camping trip. He viewed Jews as greedy manipulators controlling banks, media, and politics. Pacifism and World War I blame. Ford was a strong pacifist. He blamed World War I on German Jewish bankers and international Jewish financiers. The Wahlbergs, Jacob Schiff, Kuhn and Leb and co., he believed they profited from wars and fomented them. This view radicalized him after his failed 1915 peace ship mission to end the war. Okay, so this is just another thing that people have believed over time, that like the reason why we have wars is because the bankers back them and they back both sides and blah, 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 blah. This is just a thing that has existed in culture for a really long time. But when you understand history and you think logically and you get a bigger picture of the world, there has always been wars. It doesn't take people from the Levant to come into an area to then cause wars, okay? They have always been around. The hordes, the Mongol hordes went around killing everyone they came into contact with, okay, without Jews around. The Rus conquered the Tartars and on and on. Like, it's very late. I can't, think of everything. But like way before there was just Jews around in every place, there were tons and tons of wars. Okay. Like, this isn't something they created because they happen to make banks. Okay, fear of modernity and social change. Ford idolized rural traditional American life. He saw rapid industrialization. See, this is what I'm talking about. Anytime you have a big change in society, Then there was immigration. There was a big immigration push, especially Eastern European Jews, urbanization, and cultural shifts as threats. Jews became the scapegoat for these changes, blamed for communism, capitalism, moral decay, and undermining Christian values. So, also just throughout history, you will have these pushes where there's great changes in society, great upheaval, great immigration, and stuff like that. People start getting upset. They start looking around. And then because unfortunately people don't put a lot of stuff together, or they don't know a lot of stuff, etc., from history and whatever, it's just easier in their mind to go to make this leap. Influence from others. His secretary, Ernest G. Leibold and Associates, including this Russian guy, fed him the protocols and related materials in 1920. Ford's newspaper staff amplified these ideas. Power and platform. Owning the Dearborn Independent gave him a mass media tool. He used it to educate Americans, distributing the International Jew via Ford dealerships. He saw himself as exposing a hidden threat that fit what was going on in the world. And there's like so much more that goes into it because this is a complex topic, especially when we're talking about the things that were going on during the time of World War II and even World War I, where you had so many social uprisings, so much communism, and then Marxism got put into it, and it was causing all this stuff. There has been, people think this is new. There has been this issue with liberal ideologies and left-leaning political ideologies have been causing ruckus and problems for forever. And so when all this was going on, then you had the fascism, which is also just another liberal left-leaning ideology that rose up to try to question and deal with the issue with the communism and the revolutionary problems that just uproot society and cause all kinds of problems in society. So people were thinking fascism might be the answer. So a lot of people were looking into it, just like people do today, where they read different philosophies, they think about things, they're like, these are problems that we're seeing. What can we come up with? You know what I mean? And so people back then, like Henry Ford and other people, were looking into these political ideologies and trying to figure out what could be the answer, you know? And so this is just the way that human nature works. And these are just patterns that you can recognize throughout history. And that's why it's good to know history. Doesn't mean that Henry Ford was a bad person per se. He probably wasn't. I don't know much about his personality, but he probably was a good person in a lot of other ways. But he fell into these conspiracy theories for at least a little while. And he was also looking into all kinds of other types of ideology and worldviews that are out there at that time. So you had Bolsheviks in America, even. It was just crazy, you know? We have, times of calm and times of peace, and then we have times of just complete societal upheaval, and it's just a pattern throughout history.
And of course, the gravitas of Henry Ford himself saying this means something. I also think it's worth noting how long ago this was that Henry Ford was saying they seem to match everything going on, because that's exactly the claim I'm going to be making later here in the year 2026, 100 years after Henry Ford made his statement. The statement is just as true as it ever was.
They seem to match everything that's going on because they were written by Machiavelli, who was an astute observer and thinker and writer of human nature and the way politics work. It sounds like today, and it sounds like how it was back then, because Machiavelli was an astute, very smart observer and understander of human nature and politics and the way that these things work. This is the way that it has always worked. All he was doing was writing a book to rulers on exactly what you have to do to make this stuff work. And he observed it through human nature and studying history and stuff like that. I made a video on this channel a while back. It's a really good video called Spycraft in the Ancient Times. And in that video, you can see that in the ancient of times, going all the way back, things were like this. They even had spy agencies and stuff. Okay, so it seems to fit because it's just the way the world works. It's the way it's always worked. We live in a fallen world.
Now, the term protocol, the word protocol, signifies a precise, in the front of the document, a draft document, minutes of a proceeding. In this case, protocol means minutes of the proceedings of the learned elders of Zion. These protocols give substance of addresses delivered in the innermost circles of the rulers of Zion. They reveal the converted plan of action of the Jewish nation developed through the ages and edited by the elders themselves up to date. So again, this is supposedly the minutes of a meeting of this ruling class of Jewish oligarchs, essentially, and it's supposedly written in the late 1800s, published first in 1897. Which again, whether it's valid or not, this is long enough ago that you sort of have to wonder how long all of this stuff has been in place. Interestingly, they actually symbolize themselves, the elders of Zion, and Zion itself, as the snake, the classic serpent metaphor from the Garden of Eden. And this is one of the things that you read this and you think, well, who would call themselves the snake? Like what, it's got to be a hoax. Who would sit there and go, we're the snake, we're the slimy, wily, we're just like the serpent. It's like nobody would actually do that. However, you read sort of.
Okay, so the snake or serpent imagery in the protocols of the Elders of Zion is a fabricated anti-Semitic symbol invented by the forger and elaborated by Sergei Nilus in his 1905 edition. It does not come from any real Jewish tradition, Zionist writings, or historical Jewish sources. It appears prominently in Protocol 3, which opens up with a reference to the symbolic snake of Judaism. Sergei Nilus, the Russian mystic who popularized the protocols, added a long explanatory epilogue describing it in detail. He falsely claimed it came from secret Jewish Zionism records dating back to King Solomon in 929 BC. Key descriptions from Nilus: the elders supposedly planned a peaceful conquest of the world using the slyness of the symbolic snake. The head is the snake initiated leaders plotting the scheme, the body of the snake, the Jewish people as a whole. Okay. The snake penetrates into the hearts of the nations, undermining and devouring non-Jewish power. It travels through history, Greece, Rome, Spain, France, England, Germany, Russia, etc., encircling Europe and eventually the world, with its head returning to Zion, Jerusalem, after completing the conquest through economic crisis, moral corruption, and chaos.
The purpose of them calling themselves the snakes, and actually makes sense. These learned men decided by peaceful means, it says, to conquer the world for Zion with the slyness of the symbolic snake, whose head was to represent those who had been initiated into the plans of the Jewish administration, and the body of the snake to represent the Jewish people. The administration was always kept secret, even from the Jewish nation itself. So what it's saying here is the elders of Zion are the head of the snake. The body will always follow the head, even if it doesn't know where the head is going. The body, the regular Jews out there, don't necessarily know what the head is thinking and where it's going, but it will follow it, and it will be used to constrict the prey, right? So again, when this document is treated as a viciously anti-Semitic document, you have to understand, in the document itself, it acknowledges that the vast majority of Jews, the Jewish population in America or anywhere else, are unaware of the way that they're being used to carry out this plan. And that, of course, is absolutely true, and we know that the trauma-based mind control psychological programming of the Jewish people is perhaps the most intense out of anybody when you read about the way in which even very, very young Jewish children are, told about the horrors of the Holocaust and told that if they aren't, sufficiently loyal to the Jewish people, that it will inevitably happen again. That, I think, is a horrifying thing to say to children, but...
Okay, so this is true. So like I said, there's going to be a lot of stuff that is true that can be pointed to specific things. So like I might have ranted about this in a previous video, but the Jewish people are a traumatized, generationally traumatized group of people, not only because of all this stuff throughout history and the pogroms and everyone turning on them constantly, but also from just not that long ago, World War II and the Holocaust, and which was systematically destroying a whole group of people. Like, so trying to completely annihilate a whole group of people in the most craziest weird ways that only the new industrial age could have come up with, right? And so they did go through a lot of trauma, and that trauma has been passed down. And there was like a trial in like the 60s for one of the last Nazis or whatever, the last Nazi tried, and then executed, I believe, in Jerusalem. I think all this happened in Jerusalem, if I'm remembering correctly. Kind of stirred up like a lot of this memory in the Jewish population, or at least a portion of them, and got them all kind of worked up and emotional about the whole thing. And they did talk to their kids about it and show their kids the images, and the kids watched the trial. And like, so notably, Roseanne Barr talks about how when she was like 3 years old, they showed her all this stuff, all these videos and pictures of the Holocaust and everything. And then would be super traumatizing. And they told her, if I'm remembering correctly, the entire quote, that you have to be careful in these nations that we live in, because at any point they can turn on you and do this again. So yeah, that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. So that is true. That's why there is a resentment on both sides that bubbles up. And that's why it's important to talk these things out and to think logically and rationally, and to try to understand human nature and try to understand historical relevance. When we are dealing with today, we have to analyze today by historical knowns. That's how we know how things can turn out. That's how we know what this means. That's how we know this is like this because of this and this and this. And if you don't know the this and this and this, then things can be very confusing, and you can get taken down very strange roads, right? And so it is my understanding, I made a video about it, about how the two world wars traumatized everybody and caused everybody to do all this crazy stuff, a lot of it that we see today. Not just Jews, all the stuff, all the liberal stuff put into place, all the multiculturalism, which isn't just only the Jews' fault. Like, this whole notion is so that the World War IIs never happen again, because everybody was super traumatized. The reason why Russia is reacting the way it is on the world stage is because it's super traumatized. The reason why China acts the way it does is because it's super traumatized. This wasn't that long ago. China lost 21 million people. Russia lost 27 million people. So, you know, they lost 27 million people, and then instantly, when the war was over, the United States wanted to arm Germany again and reunify or arm Germany again, which is what caused a wall to go up and all that stuff, because Russia was extremely traumatized. And I think also just the downtroddenness of the Western nations and other nations too, like Russia has a problem with downtroddenness too, like in depression and stuff that it's had to pull itself out of, that it's not all the way out of yet. And then also you have to remember that different tribal groups, different ethnicity groups deal with things differently. So America, like, take myself for example, I deal with trauma and tragedy and hardship way different than other people do. I'm a very resilient stock. Okay, other people aren't. When things happen to them, it's harder on them. And you can look at that in the world stage, with ethnicities and stuff, okay? So the reality of it is what it is. It is what it is the best thing I can think to say.
I'm called anti-Semitic for that. So we're going to begin with protocol number 1. So we begin with protocol number 1. It begins by saying, putting aside fine phrases, we shall speak of the significance of each thought. By comparisons and deductions, we shall throw light on the surrounding facts. What I'm about to set forth, then, is our system from 2 points of view, that of ourselves and the goyim, i.e. non-Jews. That's where that word first crops up. This is an important point. And this sort of underlies the entire philosophy of the document. It must be noted, they say, that men with bad instincts are more in number than the good. And therefore, the best results in governing them are attained by violence and terrorization, not by academic discussions. The modern word would be, of course, terrorism. And when you see things like this, again, you think, who would write this? Who would start their document? Who would start their political manifesto by basically saying, let's do terrorism? Yeah, it seems kind of crazy, but you hear their reasoning, you hear the why they believe this, and it turns out not to be so far-fetched. Again, we actually have seen many cases of people, defending Israel in many cases and using this type of language. You'll start to see ideas from the protocols reflected in things that you see in the news and everyday life. So we'll skip down to part 6 of the first protocol, where it says, political freedom is an idea, not a fact. This idea one must know how to apply whenever it appears necessary with this bait of an idea to attract the masses of people to one's party for the purpose of crushing another who is in authority. Essentially saying that, well, let's continue because it fleshes it out. This task is rendered easier if the opponent has himself been infected with the idea of freedom, so-called liberalism, and for the sake of this idea, is willing to yield some of his power. It is precisely here that the triumph of our theory appears. The slackened reins of government are immediately, by the law of life, caught up and gathered together by a new hand, because the blind might of the nation cannot for a single day exist without guidance, and the new authority merely fits in the place of the old, already weakened by liberalism. So the protocols basically perceive liberalism as the artillery barrage before the invasion, right? It softens up the target. It basically makes it easier to conquer somebody because you convince them to conquer themselves. You convince them to willingly.
Okay, so the reason why this has an anti-liberalism bent to it is because the monarchs also have an anti-liberalism bent. So it's saying like the liberalism is what caused this to happen. Well, the monarchs didn't want liberalism. They wanted their dang monarchs back, and they were tired of like these liberal ideologies that overtook the United States and caused their colonies to fight back there, and the colonies in South America and like all over the dang place. All these monarchies were having all these problems with these revolutionary ideas, and also classical liberalism is a revolutionary idea compared to the traditional monarch system. Okay, so you have to keep this in mind when you're hearing him read this.
As they put it, loosen the reins, let up on your control, and they know, because they have a monopoly of capital, that they can always basically move in to the vacuum. That's what it means when it says the law of nature. It means just like in the physical world, nature abhors a vacuum. The same is true with a power vacuum. Another power will move in to fill it. They explain where they get their power. They say, in our day, the power which has replaced that of rulers who were liberal is the power of gold, right? Essentially saying rulers who were liberal, that liberalism caused them to lose their power, lose their control, and instead the markets have scooped it up. The money controllers have scooped it up. Time was, they say, when faith ruled. The idea of freedom is impossible of realization because nobody knows how to use it with moderation. It is enough to hand over to people to self-government for a certain time, for that people to be turned into a disorganized mob. From that moment, we get internecine strife, which soon develops into battles between classes, in the midst of which states burn down and their importance is reduced to that of a heap of ashes. Now, again, the interesting thing about this is that if this was truly published in the late 1800s, as I think it was, I mean, after all, you've got Henry Ford remarking it's been around for 16 years. That was in the early 1900s. Clearly, this document's been around for a while. That means it predates the communist revolution by like 20 years. Communist revolution, 1917, end of the first, in the middle.
Oh. Wow. I was literally about to pause it and say, of course, it's talking about, like, this is like vaguely describing just the way that things were, ever since the communist revolutions and stuff like that. And then he says this predates the communist revolution. And I was thinking, just now in my head, I was like, wait, what do you mean? And then he said the 1917, which would be the Russian communist revolution. That wasn't the first communist, like, do you think Russia had no idea about anything that was going on outside of it? Those Russian revolutionaries were outside of Russia. They brought that stuff to Russia. Oh my gosh. I I thought listening to that Elizabeth Lane interview was bad. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me just try to convey, and best I can with my quick little search here, how old communism goes back and or like the ideals of communism and the problems it was causing. So, ideals of communal property and equality appear in Plato's Republic, early Christian communities, all things in common, and some medieval peasant revolts. Early modern period, 16th to 17th century, radical groups during the English Civil War, the Diggers in 1649, who tried to create communal farming colonies. In the 18th century, the French Revolution of 1789 to 1799 had radical egalitarian factions. Francis Noel Bauff's Conspiracy of the Equals in 1796, often called the first communist movement, they wanted to abolish private property and establish a revolutionary dictatorship for equality. Utopian socialists, early 1800s, Robert Owen of Britain, Charles Fortier, Henry de Saint-Simon of France proposed ideal communal societies. These were idealistic, and not revolutionary Marxist. 1848, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels published the Communist Manifesto. This marks the birth of scientific communism, or Marxism as we know it today, called for proletariat, working class revolution, and to overthrow capitalism. The revolution of 1848 across Europe were influenced by these ideas, but they were mostly liberal and nationalistic uprisings with socialist elements, not full communist takeovers. Paris Commune of May 1871 remains the correct answer for the first real attempt at working class socialist communist government takeover in a major Western city. It was the first time a city was run on explicitly social communist principles inspired by Marxist ideas, workers' councils, separation of church and state, attempts at worker control of factories. Marx himself called it the first example of dictatorship of the proletariat, even though it only lasted 72 days before being crushed. And if I worked this AI, I could come up with even more and probably earlier examples and et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that he is saying that, oh, this was written, it was published before the revolution. So why are they talking about revolutionary things and da 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 da, like they were planning it? This has been going on since the early 1600s or the mid 1600s. This came about with the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, before the Enlightenment, you only just had feudal system monarchies. Okay? At one point we had city-states, emperors, whatever, but like not really the way that we have the world set up the way it is today with constitutions and rights and jury trials and et cetera, et cetera. So that all came about because of the Enlightenment period where thinkers, wealthy people, mostly elites who had time to sit around and come up with ideas and think about things, did all this stuff, and we had all the art back then, and just the Enlightenment period. That is where all these liberal ideas came from. And so you have classical liberalism, and then you have socialism, and you have all these ideas that started coming into the milieu of the society. And then even before that, you had stuff going on. Like I've mentioned before, the ideas that the communists drew from Hegel and stuff, Hegel drew those ideas from people before him, and the people before him drew it from the Plato time period, and you had cults back then that were doing this stuff, and that guy Pythagoras that did the Pythagoras theorem ran a hippie cult way back then. Okay, so this is always a thing. This is always a thing. That's why it sounds familiar. That's why it sounds like today. It is always a thing. It's always a thing. It's always a thing. It's always been a thing. All throughout history, it's been a thing. Okay? Like, the easiest way I can explain it without going into like a million and millions of words, this has always been a thing.
Really, of the First World War, all of this stuff predates that. So it's interesting that all of this stuff seems to be presaging, pointing to a communist revolution that had not yet happened, but would basically follow this exact tack. Now, again, things change. We are dealing with human beings here. We're not dealing. I mean, they're not God, despite what they tell you. They don't have omnipresence or omnipotence. They ain't God, is what I'm saying. They're not God. They can't control.
Are Jews going around telling people that they're God? I haven't heard them say that. What on earth? Like, where's that coming from?
The world. They have to deal with human endeavors. They have to contend with human will. And so, sure, they can pull off one communist revolution, but then they sort of show their hands. And then people learn, what they're up to, and then they have to change tactics. So, what they're talking about here is written for a time and a place. Since then, if these, protocols are still active, which I believe they are, they would have been updated and upgraded. And
by the way, Jews did not create communism. Okay? They didn't create these things. They joined the movements like everybody else. Humanity created these things. It was mostly like a Western thing, because like I said, of the Enlightenment period. And even before that, like I was explaining, it's just a thing. It's a thing that Western people come up with weird ideas, and Jews join them because they live in Western societies. So, like I've explained before, the communist revolution in Russia was not predominantly Jews. Like, it was some of the leaders were, because they were of Jewish lineage and stuff that had studied in the West and came back with these ideas. But the large majority of the party that started all this were not Jewish. Like, the Jews only represented a very small percentage of that party. And like I've explained before, there was the Democratic Socialist Party of Russia. They were one of the parties in the parliament or whatever. And then inside of that party, there became a faction split, and that faction started calling themselves the majority, which in Russia, Bolshevik means majority. So they started calling themselves the majority inside the Democratic Socialist Party of Russia. Then they are the ones who started this whole Bolshevik revolution and stuff. But the party, the Bolsheviks were made up of 23,000 people, I think, at one point, and like less than 900 of them were Jews. So that's a very small percentage. And the Jews joined that party because they said they were going to stop the pogroms. So they're like, okay, great. Let's join this party. And it's also left wing, and Jews just tend to be left wing. It's just what it is.
You'll hear again some of the archaic language here. They've updated it for a modern audience, let's say, to use modern technology to make the most out of their intentions. They say, whether a state exhausts itself in its own convulsions, whether its internal discord brings it under the power of external foes, in any case, it can be accounted irretrievably lost. It is in our power. The despotism of capital, which is entirely in our hands, reaches out to it a straw that the state, willy-nilly, must take hold of. If not, it goes to the bottom. Again, the translation's a little odd. The language is a little bit odd. I don't think they mean willy-nilly here. I think the correct translation would be something like out of desperation. Because what it's saying is that you infect the people with ideas of liberalism. In other words, you go to the people through the media, through direct approachment to the people themselves. You don't go through the power structures, but you say to the people, the government basically is withholding freedoms from you. The government is oppressing you. The government.
You're you're basically describing liberalism, dude. This is just liberalism throughout the ages. This is vague references to what the liberals do.
Is treating you badly. You need to demand more rights. You need to demand something more. The government, out of fear of not giving in, ends up giving in, loosening its power just a little bit. You repeat that over and over. The people see, hey, we can get concessions. Let's make more demands. More demands are made. More concessions are made. If they try to push back, it becomes violent. Basically, one way or another, this feedback loop ends with the collapse of the state. And the only way the state can survive this bankruptcy is by getting money from the money lenders, who are entirely of the elders of Zion. So I don't know if we need to go through the whole history, but long story short, this basically centers around the Rothschild family in particular, but other major Jewish banking families. But the Rothschilds in particular, the father, the patriarch of the Rothschild family, sent his 5 sons to the 5 capitals of Europe. They developed this system of banking where they have incredibly sophisticated intelligence networks, communication networks that gives them the upper hand over governments. They're able to lend vast amounts of money to governments using the fractional reserve system that they came up with. And basically over a century or so.
So this Rothschild conspiracy theory is just so old and like frankly boring and unoriginal at this point, but let's get into what he just said, okay? Yes, Mir Amschel Rothschild did strategically send or position his 5 sons to establish banking branches in major European financial centers. It was not a plot, though, to take over those countries. Rothschild, 1744 to 1822, a Jewish banker from the Frankfurt ghetto, built a successful finance business. In the early 19th century, he and his sons expanded it by creating an interconnected network of banks across Europe. He stayed in Frankfurt. Solomon went to Vienna. Nathan went to London. That's the one who became the most influential. Carl went to Naples and James went to France or Paris. This happened mainly between the 1800s and the 1820s. The brothers used family ties, coded letters, and courier networks for fast information sharing. This was a major advantage before the modern telecommunications. They financed governments, infrastructure, and wars, helping Britain against Napoleon. It was a brilliant business strategy for the era, diversifying risk, assessing different markets, and creating the first truly international private banking network. The family became extremely wealthy and influential through legitimate finance. The conspiracy twists take over the world. The claim that this was a sinister plot for global domination is a classic anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. I don't know if it's anti-Semitic. Like, I know lots of people who believe this who don't like hate all Jews or whatever. Like, this is like kind of a low level, like fairly innocent conspiracy theory that doesn't, well, it didn't normally. I mean, like in the past, I guess now I might have to rethink or reassess that, but it's not generally one, like you can hold, like lots of people hold this like idea that the Rothschilds are up to stuff without becoming like full blown Jew hating people, right? It distorts real success into a secret cabal controlling governments, wars, economies, and even modern central banks. This trope emerged in the 19th century and was amplified in the protocols of Elgin Zion. So is that where this came from? It plays on old anti-Semitic stereotypes of Jews as greedy manipulators of money. In reality, the Rothschilds were one powerful banking family among many, competing with the Barings and the Wahlbergs. They influenced policy through loans, normal for bankers. They did not control countries. Governments often used them, not the other way around. Many branches declined in power over time. Today, the Rothschild name is still used in finance, but their influence is far smaller than in the 1800s, and the wild world control claims have been repeatedly debunked as baseless. Okay, so also, like, this is just a thing. Like, people have done this all throughout history. So you have the Medici family, right? So I don't know if you guys know who the Medici family is. Okay, so I asked, how does this compare to the Medici family to give a non-Jewish comparison to a powerful family? So the Rothschild family and the Medici family are excellent parallels. Both rose from relatively modest origins through innovative banking, built vast international networks, financed governments and wars, gained enormous political influence, and became major cultural patrons. The key difference is religion ethnicity. Medicis were Catholic Italians, Rothschilds were Jewish, which highlights how conspiracy theories single out the Rothschilds, treating them while treating non-similar Jewish dynasties as normal history. Okay. And then it gives like a lot of interesting stuff about and compares the two. Now let's look up the Pacers, pronounced Pacer. Okay, so the family referring to the Pacers, the Pacer family was a real but relatively obscure family in North Carolina, mainly Lincoln and Gaston counties in the 19th, early 20th century. They were involved in local business, including railroads, cotton mills, and land ownership. Lewis Cass Pacer was the most prominent member and did build significant wealth through railroads and related businesses. They were German-French Huguenot descent, not French royalty, with roots tracing back to immigrants of the 1700s to early 1800s. No credible evidence links them to Europe. So there's a lot of conspiracies around this family too, for example. One of the most powerful hidden families in America, sometimes called the rulers behind the Rothschilds. So this is a fringe conspiracy theory. Okay. And I'm just mentioning this because there is this just prevailing thing in conspiracy theories when there's conspiracies around the Medici family too, okay? So, but what I'm trying to do by comparing these is that anytime there's like a wealthy family that has done wealthy things and then they make networks and stuff like that, you're going to get conspiracy theories and people that like connect dots in weird ways and stuff like that. Normally they're harmless and fine. So the Rothschilds, there's a lot of conspiracies around them. Like I said, sometimes it doesn't go into this full blown, like all Jews are bad thing. Just like, oh, they were doing shady stuff, right? And maybe they were. Human nature is that you do shady stuff. Jews aren't exempt from that. They're not like some, magical human that has to maintain all complete holiness and goodness and be the pinnacle of all moral society. Okay. Like this is just the way it is. So they could have probably done some shady stuff, or one of them in the family did, or like whatever, you know what I mean? But they just basically built a really successful banking business, and banks, what they do is they loan money to governments when, like I said, it helped them defeat Napoleon, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how they make their money. They loan people money. Like that's what they do. So anyway, let's get back to the video.
They insinuate their way into the highest halls of power in every country in Europe. And the ultimate sort of conclusion of that is with the Battle of Waterloo and Nathaniel Rothschild buying up the British markets, et cetera, et cetera. So already by the late 1800s, money itself, the entire market, the entire economic world was already in the hands of these agents, weaponizing this plan. And this crops up over and over again, that once you get your hands on that, everything else falls into place. The classic phrase from the Rothschilds, or at least credited to the Rothschilds, is, give me control of the monetary system and I care not who writes the laws, right? As long as the Federal Reserve exists, there's not much Congress or the president or anybody else that can do to change the old.
Okay, so I no longer believe any quotes that conspiracy theorists or conspiracy world comes up with, because every time I've checked them, almost they are not true. So let's check that quote. I've heard this quote many times in my life, over and over. Let's check it. Yep, of course, I'm going to put this on the screen. No, the Rothschilds never said this. The quote you're referring to, variations include, give me control of a nation's money supply, monetary system, and I care not who writes, makes its laws. It is entirely fabricated. It is one of the most commonly repeated false attributes in conspiracy literature. He never said it. No letters, no speeches, no contemporary records from his lifetime contain anything of it. This quote first appeared in print in 1935, more than 120 years after his death, in Gertrude M. Coogan's book, Money Creators. Coogan was publishing anti-Semitic baking conspiracy theories. It has been falsely linked to Mayor Amschel and sometimes his son, Nathan Meyer Rothschild. Okay, so this is just so infuriating to me.
Ultimate trajectory of the society that we live in, it's in the hands of the unelected and frankly evil banking class. So again, in the late 1800s, this was already the case. And since that's the case, they know that causing disruption, strife, chaos, collapse in any country around the world isn't actually a negative to them, because they are going to be the ones who the states are going to have to come to get money to rebuild. You know, it's almost like fractional reserve banking and sort of these mystical banking practices where they fabricate money out of thin air. It's like the ring of power, right? It does actually multiply your wealth many times over. You can actually do really great things with credit, right? You don't have to pay for it, but you put it on credit. You can, that's actually the engine behind a lot of economic development, but it comes with a poison pill.
Okay, so this is just the way banks work. They're like making it sound like there's some kind of weird plot or something. This is how banks work. That's what they're for. Countries need these banks. This is not something strange. Like, once you understand how the economic system works, which is kind of complicated, but it's not that hard to understand. I might leave a link, if I can remember, to a video in the bottom of a creator who's good at explaining like what's going on with the reserve and how money comes and goes and how they make it all work in layman's terms. Like, he's a layman, but he studied and he had like a good mind and grasp of these things, and then he like can update people on what's going on. The way that it works is just like, we would have nothing. We wouldn't have these smartphones, right? We wouldn't have this computer. We wouldn't have any of the stuff. We wouldn't have like air conditioning and housing and all this stuff if it wasn't for banking. Like, it wouldn't be possible for all this stuff to exist, all the stuff that we enjoy in society. So like, once you understand how banking works and all that, this is just, how it goes. Could you regulate it and have it do different things? Sure. I mean, like, there's things you could do if you don't like what it's doing, but it's all sort of already regulated. There's like times that they pull cash in, and like what's called, my God, I can't think of it, all the words today. They have to make it simple, they basically have to burn, then they have to burn and release to keep this. And they'll raise interest rates, lower interest rates. And it's like they're riding this wave throughout society to keep it all going and smooth and everything. And there's a whole like science behind it all. So, and it's actually pretty fascinating.
Pill, but all the economic development that you'll ever make with it will be in the hands of the people that lent you the money in the first place. So it's like the ring of power. It gives you great power. It gives you great ability to do magical things, but at the end of the day, it will all fall to dust, because everything that you do is at the behest of and has to comport with the will of the people that gave you the money, who, by the way, despise you.
What?
They say, should anyone of a liberal mind say that such reflections as above are immoral, I would put the following questions. If every state has two foes, and if in regard to the external foe, it is allowed to, and not considered immoral, to use every manner of art of conflict, as, for example, to keep my enemy in ignorance of plans of attack and defense, to attack him by night or in superior numbers, then in what way can the same means in regard to a worse foe, the destroyer of the structure of society and the commonwealth, be called immoral and not permissible? So again, that's the fascinating thing about this document, is it's kind of convincing in certain parts, right? That's a good argument. Hey, in warfare, everything's allowed, right? You can attack people secretly. You can do false flags. You can wear the uniform of your enemy to sneak up behind him. It's war, and all's fair in love and war. And they're basically saying, well, if the exterior foe is even less dangerous than the internal foe, why shouldn't we be able to use the same ruthlessness, the same underhanded tactics, anything necessary to deal with the internal foe? The difference is that ostensibly an external foe is a threat to your entire community. It's a collective action that you're taking against a collective enemy or an enemy to your collective. When you start turning that same outrage or war against your own people, it's something entirely different. It's utterly and completely different. And yet the way it's phrased here can be very convincing.
Okay, so one of the reasons why it's convincing is because it uses vagueness and lack of specificity. I don't know if I'm saying that word right. That doesn't sound right. Specificity. Specificness, whatever. Okay. So this is a logical fallacy or effect called the Barnum effect or the Forer effect. The text uses broad apocalyptic language about controlling finance, media, governments, morality, and inciting chaos to achieve world domination. They are recycled anti-Semitic tropes from centuries earlier. No concrete details, no mentions of specific technology, internet, AI, smartphones, countries, beyond the generic goyim, which means nations, leaders, organizations, or years. Claims of predicting economic crashes, pandemics, wars, or cultural shifts in 2026 are selective matching. The same text has been proven to predict the Bolshevik Revolution, World War II, 9/11, COVID, etc., on and on. So what that's saying is that every time people are using this document, they use it for what's going on in the area that or in the time period that they are in. So that's how vague it is, that it can be applied to anything, right? So I just wanted to add that in. I do have more, but I'm trying to, spread it out.
And if we skip down past number 11, we come to one of their, they have these sort of capitalized title segments that are extremely illuminating. And this one, again, forms a central thesis of this entire document. Right is might. They say our right lies in force. The word right is an abstract thought and proved by nothing. The word means no more than give me what I want in order that I thereby may have proof that I'm stronger than you. This is one of these quotes that's been rattling my head.
Okay, so right is might has never existed in all of time until this was written by some secret cabal of Jews in some dark corner of Russia. The idea of right is might, this is what has existed through all of history. Conquer and take the women and have babies with them to change the population demographics and create whole empires all over. You have Alexander the Great. What on earth are you talking about? This is not something that has just come up with. This is what I'm talking about. This document explains all of human nature throughout all of history. And then they're just making it sound like the Jews have come up with this to plot to take. It's like Pinky and the Brain, right? What are we doing today, Brain? We're going to take over the world. Yeah, what on earth?
Rattling around in my head for the last 2 months, once I reread this document a couple months ago. Our right lies in force. The word right is an abstract thought and proved by nothing. The word means no more than give me what I want in order that thereby I may have proof that I am stronger than you. And when you look around the world today, it's clear that there is political legitimacy to this claim, that you get to do what you get to do. You can do what you can do, and that's just how it is. Everybody in the world knows that it's wrong that Israel is carpet bombing cities in Lebanon right now. Everybody knows. Nobody wants it to happen. Obviously, people in Lebanon are being murdered. Every person of conscience in the Western world.
Okay, look, they are bombing and doing stuff in Lebanon, but it's not carpet bombing. Carpet bombing is a specific thing. Okay, that's not what's going on there. That they're not carpet bombing Lebanon. Like, okay. So there is some bombing going on, right? But it's not carpet bombing. Carpet bombing is a specific thing. Like, this is what I mean. Like, they're using let's just move on. Because like if I have to look up every single thing, carpet bombing is not just normal bombings of wars. Okay, it's a specific thing. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have access to the internet. Can look that up.
World knows that they have no excuse to do it, no right to do it, but they have the ability to do it. They have the power to do it. They're going to do it. If
The
you don't
US does
stop
it
them,
too.
it's
Russia
allowed.
does it
That's
too.
essentially
China
how
does
this
it
works.
too. The British did it
And you can see
too.
that is basically the mindset. And it almost puts the burden of the act itself on the victim. It basically says, you're letting me do this, therefore I can do it. You can't stop me, therefore I'm allowed to kill you. I'm allowed to attack you. And so I think just keep this in mind. This is one of the underpinnings, undergirdings of this entire philosophy. And it's just as brutal and as inhumane as it sounds. It goes on. They say, there's another one that it's like, this was written in the late 1800s. I could see how they maybe were writing this thinking that what they're prophesying would come to fruition within a generation. I could see them thinking that, by the communist revolutions of the early 1910s or mid 1910s, that this would be enacted. But in fact, it's taken till about 2026, but we're now seeing this process take place. They say, our power in the present tottering condition of all forms of power will be more invincible than any other, because it will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning can undermine it. And I think this is the process that we're seeing a lot now out of Israel and out of the Jewish diaspora here in America. People like Jonathan Greenblatt, for years running the Anti-Defamation League. It was the Anti-Defamation League, and they would talk about how we fight against hate, we fight against defamation, and we just want to protect minority populations of all stripes. Well, since the attack on Gaza, since the massacre of the innocents and the genocide there, and the corresponding, consequential rise in anti-Semitism because of Israel's actions, Jonathan Greenblatt has since come out and said, look, the ADL isn't here to stop all hate. We're here to protect the Jews, and we're here to benefit the Jews. In the same way, you've got, people, John Podhoretz, or any of the people that helped oust Thomas Massie. It's kind of interesting, actually, because I think some haven't really gotten the memo, or they're still trying to, conceal it a little bit. For example, you've got Ben Shapiro coming out and saying, anybody that's saying that Thomas Massie is being ousted because of his opposition to Israel, they're an idiot. He's like, they're stupid. That's the stupidest argument you could ever make. There's no way. That's not what Thomas Massie was ousted over. And if you believe that, you're an anti-Semite conspiracy theorist and an idiot. And then you've got Randy Fine, the Republican Jewish Coalition, and the ADL, and Miriam Adelson, and absolutely everybody actually involved saying, that's what you get for opposing Israel, Thomas Massie. You opposed Israel, so we destroyed you, we took you down. That was Israel doing it. That's what happens when you mess with the Jewish people. So there's a little bit of a, inconsistency there where, Ben Shapiro's acting as...
Oh my gosh. Okay, Ben Shapiro is his own person. He is not some monolith group. Ben Shapiro literally believes what he just said. What you just said he said, he believes that. He believes that that's not why he was ousted, and he believes that you guys are acting crazy and weird. So he's going to say it because that's what he believes. As far as these other people, let's see. I mean, so the idea is that Massie Massey started being crazy. I don't agree, by the way, with the stuff Massey did. I feel like he was acting very odd and strange. Um, and so, Donald Trump wanted him out, endorsed this other dude. The money got put in to get him to fund his campaign. It wasn't as much. I did look into it. It wasn't as much as people were acting like it was. Like people were saying like this ungodly number, and it really wasn't that much compared to what they were saying. But so people have no agency. Once again, people have no agency. The people there voted for somebody else. No one's holding a gun to their head when they vote. They'd been voting for Massey this entire time over and over again. So they're just so dumb that like campaign ads that come in can get all of them to change their mind. This is what I mean when they say these type of things. It's like, so you're calling us all dumb. Let's see if I can try to figure out like, oh my gosh. Miriam Adelson did not say anything like that. She did donate substantial money through her PACs linked to her. It was one of the most expensive primaries in U.S. history, with significant pro-Israel AIPAC and Republican Jewish coalition involvement. Her involvement was through standard, large-scale political donations supporting pro-Israel candidates and policies. Fine criticized Massey's concession speech, called it disgusting rhetoric that blamed Jews, and said it had no place in the Republican Party. He described Massey as an anti-Semite, celebrated his defeat, and said that he was proud that Trump helped take him out. Fine framed it as removing anti-Semitism from the GOP, not as Israel directly ousting Massey. Okay, so look, it's this type of stuff why people have ammunition to even talk about this kind of thing. So Miriam Adelson is a Jewish Republican woman from Florida, I believe. Her husband was a very affluential Jew. He died. They flew him to Israel. He like got a huge ceremony in Israel, whatever. So she's just part of this political machine that are Jewish people on the right that do pour in a lot of money into politics, and they're not going to want to help people that are super anti-Semitic. So I'm sure they use their money to go against people who would be acting that way. And but yet again, do we have no agency? And also she's an American citizen too, so she's one of our countrymen and she's on the right. Okay, so it's like, and I'm going to, in the conclusion, I'm going to get into that kind of stuff. But for now, I'm going to play a little more of this. We're going to end the video, and this is probably going to have to be a two-parter because I am tired and I want to be sort of sharp for this conversation. We're almost halfway through this video, so let me play a little bit more.
If the power is still invisible, but other people are recognizing, no, our power is too great. And I think literally that's what they believe, is they think they've got the control of social media, they've got control of the government, they're passing anti-Semitism laws. They basically think that their power is so secure that it no longer has to be invisible. They no longer have to hide it or, be ashamed of it. They're proud of it now. And I think they may have jumped the gun a little bit on that, quite frankly. But again, is this not extremely interesting that it was written in the late 1800s that supposedly this group of, Jewish elite got together and were plotting this system where they would keep their power hidden, keep their power invisible until the time in which it has gained such strength that no cunning can any longer undermine it. In other words, none of our enemies have sufficient power to stop us. That's when we will unveil ourselves. That's when we will reveal our true intentions.
This is all ideas
out of
from
the temporary
Machiavelli.
evil we are now compelled to commit will emerge the good of an unshakable rule, which will restore the regular course of the machinery of the national life, brought to naught by liberalism. The results justify the means. Let us, however, in our plans, direct our attention not so much as to what is good and moral as what is necessary and useful. Again, they want to dress it up as if their evil is justified because the end result is good, and without them doing this, the world is just lost in an ever-shifting, chaotic mess, and that only by bribery, deceit, deception, blackmail will these leaders of men, the chosen people, rule with the iron fist that will allow for human flourishing because they are getting rid of all the chaos and misery caused by liberalism, the liberalism that they themselves promote. It's obviously not true. It's just obviously not true. And that I think is part of what has shifted in the understanding of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. In other words, in the 1800s when this was written, the European people were still, for the most part, almost entirely actually, under the rule of monarchs and an aristocracy. And the idea was the aristocracy, the monarchy, they lead the people, and without them, the people will just devolve into madness, mobs, chaos, violence, and insanity. The truth is that hasn't happened. The truth is that certainly with European people, they can rule themselves. They can handle themselves. They don't actually need a tyrant above them forcing them to do the right thing. Now, that might be true for other population groups. I could see how you could live in the Middle East and you could think, man, if there's not an iron-fisted ruler here, everybody just starts killing each other. Yeah, in certain places in the world, that's absolutely true. That's not true in Europe. So I think that, they sort of expected that to happen when they overthrew the monarchs, which they absolutely did, right? Nathaniel Rothschild basically takes over the British economy in the early 1800s. 100 years later, you got to think about these things in generations or in centuries, really. And things often happen in 20 years.
They, as in the Jews, absolutely did not take over all the monarchies. That is not. Yes, 1% of the world population was able to overtake all the monarchies. It wasn't the discontent of the people, the rapid change of technology and the world, and and immigration and workforce work conditions, et cetera, et cetera, and the ideas of liberalism and communism and socialism and all this stuff that. It wasn't all that, right? None of that. Did the Jews, were they responsible for the American Revolution that separated from the monarchy? What on earth? There was a period of time of uprisings and stuff, and it went on for a while, and there were waves of it.
Year increments or 100-year increments. Well, in this case, the 100-year increment was from the takeover of the British economy by Nathaniel Rothschild following the Battle of Waterloo. 100 years later, you've got World War I, at the end of which only the British monarchy stands in Europe. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire falls, the German monarchy abdicates. Obviously, the Communist Revolution overthrows the Tsar in Russia. This was the fulfillment of basically a century-old plan, and they expected basically for Europe to fall to chaos and misery, and for them to be able to basically do what they did in Russia throughout all of Europe. And I think they learned that the goyim of Europe aren't exactly the beasts of the field that they're portrayed as, and so they've decided they just need to be killed. I think previously, under the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, they thought that they could.
Okay, we're gonna end it there. Okay, I can't. I am too tired for all this. It is really, really hard to kill people. Very hard to kill entire populations, entire countries and stuff. We went into Afghanistan. We fought there for 20 years with vast firepower, and they're all still fine and all still living there. We went into Vietnam. We napalmed the whole place with poisons and stuff, and tried to, we were crazy there. They're still Vietnamese, okay? The Russians and the Ukrainians have been fighting for 2 years, 4 years, 4 years, 5 years, I don't know. They've been fighting. and they're still both alive, okay? The Chinese still live after incursion of Mongol invaders and such and such. It is extremely hard to kill off an entire population. So the idea that the Jews have some kind of plot and now they've just decided they're going to just kill all of us, like he just said, is so illogical. Like illogical if you understand history and like this stuff. And why would they do that? Like that makes no sense. So I'm gonna end it there for this episode, and I'll probably record some more tomorrow, as I should have some time to do that then. But like, oh my gosh, you guys. I'm going to leave my final conclusion for the end of the next video because this should only be 2 parts, hopefully. But you guys, we have got to be like smarter than this. We have to be more logical than this. We have to be more analyzing of history than this. This is a poorly written, and I mean poorly written. So the idea that Jews even wrote this, like they would write something a million times better if they did. I mean, we're talking about the Jews, right? They control the whole world. You're saying they can't create a better document or whatever. So it's terribly written, horribly written. It's plagiarized. It's ridiculous. This whole thing is ridiculous. And it was set up for illiterate peasants in Russia. The Tsar put this out, like well, I don't know if he did, but his secret police put this together and put it out for a population that was basically illiterate peasants in Russia at the time that this was going on. Very few of them could read. They were transitioning out of, feudalism and into the industrial. They were very far behind in Russia with all this stuff. So they were very like, not to throw any shade to them, but they were just a little farther behind than the West with this type of like enlightenment and reading and all this stuff, which is partly part of the reason why all that terrible stuff happened to them with communism, why communism was able to take hold there, because they had no idea what was going on. They're like a traumatized people that were confused and thrown into like industrialism in a really harsh, really creepy, weird way. So anyway, I am going to end it here. So I am glad you guys are here. I am sorry I'm inflicting you with this horrible video. And I hope you have a good day or night, whatever time it is for you. And I will see you next time on The Eclectic Journalist.